Welcome and thanks for joining me for the Gut Health Turnaround Series 2.0. 21 ways to heal your gut, reclaim your energy, and look and feel amazing. My name is Leah, Kline, Health and Wholeness Coach, and I will be your host. Today I'm being joined by Darryl Edwards, the Fitness Explorer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, and he's going to be talking about the role of exercise and nature in gut health. And by way of background, Darryl Edwards is owner of Fitness Explorer Training and Nutrition based in London, England. Darryl Edwards, MSc of Health, founder of Health Unplugged, and owner of Fitness Explorer Training, is an international speaker, coach, nutritionist, and author of Paleo Fitness and Paleo from A to Z. He has been published in titles such as Men's Health, Women's Health, Ellie, Men's Fitness, and featured on the BBC and ABC in Australia, and an international documentary, We Love Paleo. After almost 2 decades working as a technologist, get that right, in investment banking, Darryl transformed his health after adopting an ancestral model to well-being. Darryl now advises people on maintaining a healthy lifestyle amidst the epidemic of obesity and other chronic lifestyle diseases. As the founder of the Primal Play methodology, he makes activity fun, effective, and engaging while getting individuals healthier, fitter, and stronger in the process. He specializes in working with children from 4 to 94, fitness for those who hate to exercise, as well as those who love it but relish a new challenge. Okay, this should be fun. So, all right, so how did you first kind of get interested in nutrition and fitness and all that?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned in my bio, my background was in technology as a computer programmer working in investment banking. And I was privileged enough to have an annual health check. And during that health check, there was a series of blood tests made and a fairly comprehensive health assessment. And during one of those assessments, I was informed that I had a whole host of issues around my health. High blood pressure, I was anemic, I had a really poor lipid profile, cholesterol profile, I was pre-diabetic, and other issues as well. So it was literally like, it was just a shock to the system kind of hearing this, especially when I felt as if I was healthy, at least on the outside. I had this appearance of health on the outside. But inside, things weren't working out well at all. And when I asked about the solution to that, I was given a whole list of meds to take, a cocktail of medication to take, to lower my blood pressure, to control my blood sugars, to sort out my cholesterol. And I was really concerned about the side effects and the kind of long-term dependency on these drugs. And it was like, oh, well, don't worry about that. If there are any side effects, we'll give you something else. And when I inquired about lifestyle intervention, the doctor didn't really have much of an idea as to what would help. So I read a book a few years previously based on the paleo diet. And what appealed to me, or what I recall, was that it was a back to basics approach about living as our ancestors did in the modern world. And I was like, let me give this a try. So I changed my diet, and there were some improvements there. I changed my approach to exercise, and there were improvements there. And when I was retested, pretty much everything had been normalized within a few months. So my blood pressure became optimal, my lipid profile became ideal, I was no longer pre-diabetic. Pretty much everything was reversed through lifestyle change alone, and I didn't have to go on any meds. And that's now almost, that's like 13 years ago now. So a significant time of changing my lifestyle and not having to never having that situation repeating itself. So it was the kind of the gateway to me recognizing the importance of lifestyle when it comes to most chronic disease. And secondly, I realized I had to change my career because I wanted to be able to advise people and how they too could transform their health in this way. Mm-hmm. So several years later, I decided to cross-train as a nutritionist, then became certified as a personal trainer, and decided to, I was then published, wrote my first book, wrote a blog, and now I travel the world talking about how people can get onto this pathway to better health.
All right. So in all those myriad of things that they told you were wrong, were there any gut issues that were, coming up with that? Or is it?
I mean, at that stage, there were no tests at that point looking specifically at gut issues. Yeah. But I'm sure, based on the diet that I was on, and based on my sedentary lifestyle, highly stressed lifestyle, lack of sleep, so there's sleep deprivation there as well. So based on all of those factors, I'm sure my gut health was obviously not a priority for me. I was regularly taking antibiotics at that stage because I was having upper respiratory tract infections at least 2-3 times a year, which I believe it was just seasonal. It's autumn, time for another cold, time for another infection. Please give me some antibiotics. The doctors would say, you don't need them, but I want you to treat me with something. Okay, reluctantly, we'll give you some antibiotics. So, of course, I obliterated my gut when it came to my microbiome in terms of healthy gut bacteria. Yeah. But in terms of my understanding about gut health, that came very much later. So the process of me healing and me transforming my diet and my changing my lifestyle led to a much healthier gut flora. I was no longer having those infections on a regular basis. I, of course, stopped taking antibiotics, recognizing what they were doing to my gut flora. I changed my approach to hygiene. So, instead of becoming really obsessive, like washing my hands 50 times a day, I recognized that the immune system, we should be able to interact quite healthily in terms of our environment, in terms of bacteria. And so it became much more of an organic approach to me improving my gut health rather than a proactive one.
Okay. Many people have had, that journey, and whether it starts with knowing what was going on in the gut, usually something was going on there, whether we knew it or not, at the time. For sure. Very true. So let's get into our topic for today, and what is the role that exercise and nature play in gut health? We've kind of been talking about that a little bit, probably.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started reading and researching about gut health and my concerns around the excessive amount of antibiotics that I was taking, and there were a couple of things that I came across, and one was around the kind of hygiene hypothesis. So I suffered from eczema, and I was suffering from hay fever on a regular basis. So when I was actually venturing outdoors to exercise, which became something that I like to do, I was allergic to grass pollen, tree pollen. So pretty much any time I went into a park, it was just awful for me. And one of the first things I remember buying my antihistamines every summer, the beginning of spring, it was like, I need to get my antihistamines. I remember the pharmacist saying to me, have you noticed your infection, your hay fever is getting worse and worse each year? And I said, yes. I says, yes, that's the case. And he went, you need to stop taking your antihistamines and actually expose yourself gradually to those pollens. And I'm like, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I'm like, eyes are streaming. I'm kind of bunged up. I can't breathe. And he says, no, he says your body needs to learn how to react and respond normally to that assault that your body believes is an assault. Your immune system needs to learn how to react to that naturally. So I was like, that kind of intrigued me. And so I started thinking much more about why is my body reacting in this way? The good news in relation to that is I stopped taking antihistamines and pretty much within a year or so no longer reacted to pollen, which was fantastic. And it made me think about things like my eczema and things about, then started thinking about my gut health. And I started taking probiotics and the like. And when looking at probiotics, pretty much everything talks about food, whether it's fermented food, whether it's, the feeding of the microbiome in terms of taking probiotics, looking at things like prebiotics, and of course avoiding antibiotics. And I wondered, was there anything else that could contribute to better gut health? And it was amazing to find that there was research around physical activity. And so physical activity, the studies say that physical activity does affect the gut microbiome positively. And the more physically active you are, the better and more diverse your gut microbiome. And so my first thought around that was, oh, well, that's pretty obvious, because if you're physically active, you're likely to have an improved diet. So maybe that's what the association is. You're probably taking far more care as to what you put into your mouth in terms of nutrition, because you've started to become more physically active. Yeah. So some of this research, obviously considering this fact, took two sets of fit individuals in a rugby team. So they took, basically split this rugby team into two, both performing exactly the same type of fitness, same sort of fitness levels, and also were having a fairly controlled diet because they had nutritionists on their team. And what they found was the individuals that became fitter in terms of this control group, in terms of this controlled environment, started to have more diverse gut microbiome. Which is remarkable. Yeah. So independent of food, just an increase in physical activity was increasing diversity of the microbiome. So that kind of piqued my interest. It was like, oh, this is really fascinating. I wasn't aware of this association. So I viewed physical activity in a different light. And of course, as we know, the more diverse and the greater number of in terms of microbiome diversity is linked to better health. So as well as greater fitness links to better health, that greater fitness can lead to greater microbiome diversity, which also leads to increased health. So that was one of the items on the checklist in terms of investigating alternatives to food in relation to improving my gut health. And one interesting fact around that, one of the markers for fitness is the VO2 max. So it's a marker for aerobic fitness. Basically the ability for your heart and lungs to supply oxygen to the body for sustained periods of time. And it's something that's usually important for those who do endurance sports. If you're a runner or a cyclist, you sometimes track your VO2 max as an indicator of how you can perform at the highest level. But it's something that any individual, regardless of your level of fitness or whether you're a fanatic or not, or engaged in sport or not, you can track your VO2 max. And again, fascinating, there's a one-to-one relationship, correlation between your VO2 max and diversity of the microbiome. So there is a lot of research now in this area linking your fitness level with the microbiome.
That is amazing.
Yes, it's not many people are aware of this, yeah. And I think they've quantified it to I think 20%. So basically, the variation between somebody of the same age, same type of diet, same sort of background and so on, levels of stress, same lifestyle factors, just having a higher VO2 max, there's a 20% variation in microbiome diversity, just that factor alone. So just fitness can actually increase your microbiome diversity by 20%. So it's not just a generic, there's an increase in microbiome diversity if you exercise. They've actually quantified this down to the specifics. So it's just another good reason for a lot of us to become more active.
Mm-hmm. All right. And have you noticed a difference in like people that you've worked with as they have introduced more physical activity, as far as how their health, changes?
Yes. So, I mean, I think most of us are aware of the health benefits that come from exercise, so whether it's improving your mental health, your cognition, reducing stress, obviously it's protective of many chronic lifestyle disease. So everything from, managing blood glucose to reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease. I mean, it's pretty much as close to a silver bullet as there is in terms of lifestyle. But what my gut feeling is around this is a lot of my clients, myself in particular, I also recognize the importance of being outdoors, of kind of green fitness, of outdoor fitness, of working out outdoors. And I have a feeling that this is one of the variables that wouldn't be looked at in terms of the research. In terms of the fitness research, i.e., I've noticed part of the reason why I became much better able to handle, the pollen was because I actually started to expose myself fairly aggressively into that environment. So, for example, I was allergic to grass pollen. So if I was crawling in the grass, my eyes would stream and I would avoid that, or I would take antihistamines. So there was almost a period of almost re-educating myself and my body readjusting to these antigens, saying, actually, no, this is fine. Your immune system shouldn't react in this way. So these organisms, and also I believe soil-based organisms, you come into contact, naturally. And whereas before, if I was crawling on the ground, almost immediately I'd be rubbing some kind of bacterial gel on my hands to become clean. I was actually spending time with those organisms on my skin. So I was actually living I was living within that environment for extended periods of time. And I think that was the contributing factor. So I think most of my clients who are aware of this, who are spending times outdoor exercising, I recognize that for myself. Probably the last time that would have occurred would have been as a very small child. So before my parents decided, no, we have to have an ultra clean, ultra hygienic environment for you, and don't pick that up off the floor, don't touch the floor, don't roll around on the floor, don't, never want to see you dirty at all, don't get any mud on yourself, so I reckon, in all of those problems, when I've spoken to my parents about this, all these issues I had with allergies and so on occurred a little bit later in childhood. Definitely wasn't right at the beginning. And I believe that's the case for me. That's my kind of narrative as to why that happens. But it's never too late, because I've been able to reverse those reactions by exposing myself to that environment again. So I do spend a lot of time almost rolling around in the earth by performing these activities in the earth and in the grass. And I'm climbing trees now, so that was another way for me to expose myself to the tree pollen. So yes, so I believe those are the reasons why you're improving your body's ability to say, this is actually normal, Darryl. It's only tree pollen. What's the problem? Whereas before, I was just in an artificial environment, very clean environment, and had a fear of anything that I believe wasn't completely sanitized, and that's why I was always sick, and that's why my gut health was obviously extremely poor. So I believe that's probably had a more significant impact on my gut health than me taking probiotics and me reducing my antibiotic use. That's my personal feel. Of course, I don't have. It's an N equals one, and I can't say that's a scientific approach. But in terms of evidence base, there is a lot of evidence out there talking about the benefits of outdoor activity, and of course our exposure to soil-based organisms. So you'll find some of the best probiotics you can buy do tend to be based on soil-based organisms. So I probably shouldn't mention any brand names, but yeah, some of the leading probiotics that I would recommend to my clients tend to be based on soil-based organisms. And so once my clients are aware, just think to yourself, you can be exposed to these microorganisms just by taking them orally, or you can get much more of your skin. If you think about the largest organ you have, which is your skin, if you're exposing your skin to these microorganisms by actually touching the earth, imagine what the benefit is to you. So yes, it makes a lot of sense to me, and thank goodness there is some really good evidence behind that as well in terms of the latest science and latest research.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting when you think about it, because it's like by nature, children, when they're really young, they have no concept of staying clean. I mean, they get outside, their favorite thing usually is to get outside, be playing in dirt. They don't care if they have any fancy, stuff or not, but playing in dirt is quite sufficient. And it's like, okay, maybe there is something to that, and especially at a young age to be doing that, because that probably is part of kind of the development process of increasing, the probiotics and stuff. I mean, you get some from your mom, but you also have to get some as you're growing and stuff. So that's an interesting idea.
For sure. And as you know, there's definitely evidence that if you're breastfeeding, you have a stronger immune system than if you're having kind of cow's milk based products for feeding, and of course some of that immune system is being passed through the breast milk, for sure, but also just the mouth in contact with the breast is also exposing the baby to microbiome, to microbiota. So it's all part and parcel. As soon think about children as well, as the first possibility that they have some sort of motor control, things are in their mouth. Do you know what I mean? So nature, So it isn't even just about rolling around in the dirt. It's part of instinct. All children will do this as soon as they're able to. They want to pick things up and they want to put it into their mouth. and this is a way of basically priming the immune system to be able to tell what's good from what's bad. And I have a story, again, it's anecdotal. I remember seeing a friend of mine who she had a baby, and I remember we went to visit, and this environment was almost like an intensive care unit. When we went to the home, it was like you've got to make sure you wash yourselves before you arrive. Don't touch the doorbell. Make sure you've got some antibacterial. Kind of almost wear scrubs before you enter the house. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, this is so amazing that like the baby's in such a hygienic environment, nothing's going to go wrong. I mean, it was just so controlled. This child was one of the sickest I'd ever known. I mean, always being sick, always suffering from some sort of cold or infection. Had, in the first years of their life, they suffered from so many ailments. And of course, many years later, when I understood the implications of this, it was like, no wonder, their body doesn't have any opportunity to experience their environment. So there's always clues and cues in our environment, which makes us realize now it's kind of common sense. Like, why would we insist on that? Yeah. So I think, as I said earlier, the food is obviously the gateway, and it's obviously the most direct way that we can think about influencing our gut health. Once if it needs to be repaired, there are direct interventions that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
But from a general point of view, and to consider that there are other aspects of lifestyle factors, including stress, including sleep, quality of sleep, all affects the health of the gut. I really appreciate far more this kind of holistic approach to managing and maintaining health. So, and of course, let's not forget vitamin D and its contribution to the immune system as well. So it's almost like a compound effect where it's like, okay, I'm getting access to some dirt, I'm also getting some physical activity in, and I'm also getting some vitamin D from the sun, hopefully, if you're not living in London right now. I mean, that is. But, there's all this kind of compounding impact of just being outside and being physically active and improving your gut health at the best time. It's like win, win, win.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what are some of your favorite exercises or something that our listeners could actually do today?
So I would say taking everything on board, which I've just said, get out into your back garden, go to your local park, go out into the woods or forest if you have access to that, and crawl on the ground. That's just crawl without using your knees, just your hands and your feet, and crawl on the ground. And just really just become kind of mindful of the environment that you're in. Just appreciate where you are and how beautiful it is. And be aware you might be getting a bit of dirt on your hands, but there's nothing wrong with that. And that would be a great way to get down and dirty, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't require a huge skill base. You don't have to be really fit to do something like that. Just get down on the ground and crawl around. If you're a little bit more energetic and you have a tree in your back garden, or you have access to a tree, climb a tree. That's also something you can do, rather than going to using a climbing frame. Yeah. Use nature as your gym, and climb a tree. And if you make it a family-based activity, or something that you do with friends, then it's even more, it's even more enjoyable and engaging with having that social interaction, and you also won't feel as if the whole world's watching you. Do you know what I mean? So you'll be less self-conscious of crawling on the ground if you're doing it with others or with your family. So I think that's what I would recommend in terms of the physical activity, which is going to get you one, outdoors, two, exposing you to microorganisms and your environment, and three, you'll have some fun in doing so.
Okay, well, that would be a challenge for everybody.
Yes. If you want kind of instructions on how to do that, then please go along to my website, which is primalplay.com, and I have some instructions around that. But hopefully, even just giving you that suggestion, it's enough for you to get out there and do it yourself. Go back, just think about the things you did as a child that were within the law and and didn't annoy the adults. So anything that didn't annoy the adults when you were a kid, just do that sort of stuff, and you'll be fine. And I mean, even thinking about, even for us, we can remember. Hopefully, we can remember most of our time in terms of physical activity was outdoors. Probably was unsupervised, and we played most of the time. Most of our time in terms of physical activity was engaging in play with our friends, with our peers of that sort of age. And I've read recently, looking at some of the research, that both in the UK and the US, there are more kids admitted to hospital, more hospital admissions from kids falling out of bed than there are falling out of a tree, compared to a generation ago. and the distance that kids are allowed to kind of free roam from home has declined by 90%. So, it might have been, for when I was a kid, it might have been a mile from home wouldn't have been an issue for my parents to allow me to play. Now it's literally like, 100 meters if you're lucky, if you actually get outside your home. So a lot of kids are only playing indoors, again, in these really, super hygienic environments, being bused to and from school, aren't even allowed to have recess anymore because you're far better focusing on your education. So, it's, yeah, I mean, I'm obviously quite passionate about this, but there's a lot we can do to improve the health for not only for ourselves but also for our children as well and grandchildren. So, something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. You want to tell our listeners about your free gift for them?
Yes. So I wrote a book called Paleo from A to Z, or from A to Z, from our American cousins, and it's a lifestyle guide to better health. So it contains tips and tricks and topics that are sometimes difficult to understand. So you might read something on a blog and go, I just don't understand what that buzzword means. So it gives you a plain English description and cross references for what these buzzwords mean. And so my free gift is an excerpt of Paleo from A to Z. So it just contains several topics that will give you a little bit more information around that, and it's available as a free download. All
right, that is great. And you mentioned earlier your website for connecting with you and learning more was primalplay.com.
Yes, primalplay.com. Yes, and my social media, if you want to contact me on social media, my social media tag is @FitnessExplorer. So please reach out to me there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Darryl, for joining me today. It's been an education.
Thank you, Leah. It was a pleasure to have this chat, and it was great to educate people around the gut microbiome and not really talking about food.
Yeah.
Even more than about 20 seconds. So yeah, so it's great to offer a different perspective around improving gut health.
Yes. And thank you everyone for listening. Come back tomorrow for more of the Gut Health Turnaround series.